So, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us on how to be super effective on a video call. If you haven't got your notepad and pen with you already, please grab them because I'm going to try and stuff this half-hour webinar full of tips and tricks and tools about how you can be the best you can be, the uncringy version of you that you can be on a video call. So, the first thing that I want to ask you to do is if you could please turn off your social media and minimize or turn off your email. And the reason for that is so that I can have your full attention. And I've also done that at my end because the hardest thing about doing a video call is often where on earth do you put your attention? So it's really easy to get distracted by emails coming in or bits of social media pinging around. We've got so many things that fire off now. So the best thing to do before you go on a video call, because it's all on one screen, is to turn it off, minimize it, turn off all the alerts and the pings and all of that so that your attention can be fully on the people that you're on the call with. It's also quite a good idea to ask other people, as I've just done, to do the same thing so that you know everybody is as focused as they can be on either the conference call or the online meeting or the webinar. We've all been kind of thrust into this, haven't we? We've all been thrust into this huge, like online, having to use video, having to talk to each other across social media from the comfort of our own home very quickly, and a lot of us have had to adapt. So it can sometimes be the case that our inner critic, i.e. the voices in our head, can kick off and start to take our attention away from the thing in hand. So certain things like, oh, do I look like that? Are they engaged? Do I sound like that? Oh my God, can all get in the way if we're not careful. So a couple of tips and tricks around this. We need to think about attention as, you know, we have 100% of it to allocate wherever we want or need to allocate it to. But the problem is when our inner critic or our voices in our head start to kick off, our attention tends to get hijacked into our heads, which means that we have less attention to give to the people who we're engaging with or should be engaging with. So if that happens, what I really want you to think about in your mind's eye is, let's put my attention on the people I'm talking to. Now, it's easier when you have thumbnails. So if you're on a meeting rather than a webinar, it's a little bit easier because you actually have faces to put your attention on. But if, like me now, you're hosting a webinar and you might have the chat boxes that we've all got in order to communicate with each other, but we don't have, or I don't have your lovely faces in front of me, then it can be a little bit trickier. So the thing to do is we really have to imagine them in our mind's eye, imagine people's faces, imagine facial expressions, and we're talking to those people. All right, it's a little bit of imagination stretch, but it's a really important thing in order to anchor our attention outside of ourselves rather than having it in our own head. Now, with most of these webinar pieces of equipment, you know, the Zooms, the WebEx, there's so many of them now. There's WebJam, I think it is, or I don't know, there's so many of them. It can be really easy to get distracted by our own little thumbnail. Oh my God, you know, do I look like that? I'm pulling a funny face when I talk, etc. My top tip is a sticky note. Now, on some of these, you can minimize your thumbnail of yourself, which can be really useful. But actually, what I find the most useful thing of all, and nobody knows that you've done it, is you grab a sticky note and you simply put it over your own face. That sounds awful, but what it means is I can put my full attention on you and I'm not distracted by the fact that I feel like I might not look particularly well turned out today or whatever those voices in my head say. So there's a few tips around keeping your attention fully on the people and the topic in hand. Now, the other thing I want you to think about when you're doing these online video calls or conferences or webinars is make sure that you are establishing or re-establishing the rapport with your people. If you know the people on the other side of the call, on the other side of the screen, you can obviously use common reference points. You know, you can check in like how's the family, how's the dog, etc. If, like with you guys, I don't know all of you, there's a couple of you I know whose names I've seen, but I don't know all of you, then I need to start to use common references that I feel might be relevant. So I might reference the point that, you know, everyone here who likely works in PR or media, at least for the most part, some of you might work in some other areas, that is a way of building rapport with all of you, because internally you're sort of going, yes, that's me, and nodding, and we're building as much rapport as we can. Questions are quite a good way to build rapport as well. So asking people how they are. And of course, that can work on either a meeting where people can vocally add, or it can work on a webinar where you've got your pop-up question and answer and your chat boxes. And you've also got your hands up feature. So you can use those in order to create as much of a two-way conversation as possible, even if it feels like it's a one-way webinar. So use those tools, play around with them, and practice, practice with them, and see what works best for you as well, because the most important thing with this is that you're comfortable, or you're as comfortable as you can be. You're not feeling like, oh, this is cringy. You're getting yourself familiar with the equipment enough that you feel like it's something that you can work with. I'm loving that people are loving the post-it note idea. Honestly, it saves my life every time. Check in as well with people, like how are you doing? Is this making sense? Does anyone have any questions? Obviously, you don't want to ask that all the time, but it is useful just to check in so that you get a sense, if you're hosting, of where people are at. And it also makes people feel like they're looked after. So that relationship and rapport building is definitely something that you want to have on your radar when you're doing these video calls. Keeping things relevant as well, being really vocal and specific about what's in it for them. So joining the dots for people. It might feel like something is really bleeding obvious to you in your head, but it isn't always obvious to other people. So spell things out to them. Use examples as much as you can in order to keep things relevant to the people that you're talking to. Give that some thought. The other thing, of course, is that we can use, this is one of the bonuses of video call, we can use notes around the side of our desk. Nobody can see, right? I mean, I've got notes here. You wouldn't know unless I told you. But this is one of the benefits. You can put sticky notes. You can put little things there, you know, oh, this would make it relevant for this person, or this would be relevant to this particular sector if you're delivering to a bigger group. And have those little reminders around you if you need them, because they can really help you to keep you on point, and they can really help to keep you relevant to your audience. This is probably the biggest thing. And actually, yeah, people are asking, like, how do we keep people engaged? And it can be quite a tricky one, this. So one of the things that we lose the most when we're doing a video conference call or a video call is that we lose all of the torso, all of the human torso. So we're losing a lot of the body language and the non-verbal communications that we would ordinarily have. So this can be really, really tricky, because we're trying to just read from, like, you know, shoulders up. Which is why when you turn up your listening behavior, if you think about just dialing it up a couple of tweaks, you know, like as if it's on a dimmer switch, and you do a few more nods or a few more, you know, head shakes, or turn up your smile or your frown, or whatever is going to express where you're at to other people on the video call, that is going to be really helpful in terms of engaging and creating more of that two-way. It's also fine to ask people to do that. Again, I'm working on the assumption for this particular example that you've got the little thumbnails up there and it's more of an online meeting rather than a webinar. But it is all right to ask people to nod and to respond in a physical way, so that you know that they're engaged with you, and just say, guys, I can't read your minds, or I can't see what you think, and would it be possible for you to, like, give me a thumbs up or a hands up or whatever it is. Use people's names as well. If people ask a question, whether that's vocally or whether that's using a chat box, you can use their names. You know, thank you very much, Emma. Thank you so much, Sophie. Use people's names, acknowledge their participation, give them the credit and give them the recognition for being involved in this particular thing. Let's move on now to clarity. So again, having these notes around you to keep yourself clear and to keep yourself on point can be really key. A little bit of preparation about succinctness is also key. So we don't want to be waffling on, which can happen when we're under pressure. When we're adrenalized and we're, you know, feeling like, oh my God, I've got to get all the information in, we can tend to overtalk and waffle. Either that or we clam up. Neither of them is obviously very effective on a video call. So keep things straight to the point. Keep them succinct. Less is more. All right, always remember that, less is more. People are smarter than we usually give them credit for in our heads. So assume they've got it unless they indicate otherwise. All right, get to the point, stay on point. Again, having those post-it notes around you or those little notes or scripts might be useful. So if you go off on a tangent or someone asks a question, then you can bring them back on, you can bring yourself or you can bring them back to the point. Just had a really nice question here from one of you, which is, would this work with shyer members of the team? And I'm just wondering which part we're referring to with this one. I'm going to come back to this. Let me know exactly specifically. So using people's names. Thank you. I think it's something that if shyer members of the team could get used to using names, it would be great. But asking people to nod or getting them to be more expressive can actually be quite a useful thing to do. But also, you know, it is worth bearing in mind that not everyone is as expressive. And so we can become very egocentric when we are the one that's hosting or holding the baton on a video call. So it's worth remembering that if someone doesn't always give that non-verbal behavior, or they don't necessarily use the name, or they're not as vocal as we would like them to be, not necessarily a reflection on you. Some people are more introverts. Some people are, you know, like to process. Some people like to sit back and listen and just take notes. So it's worth remembering that as well. So you want to try and get people to do it as much as possible, but also recognize that everyone has a different learning style, and, you know, that it's not about your lack of being able to run a kick-ass video call. I also want to now go on to the use of pauses, and this is probably my most favorite tip, and I use this when I'm working with presenters a lot. So use of pauses is a butt saver when it comes to getting yourself out of tricky situations, but also when it comes to just turning up your impact. You're welcome, Nina, thank you. So what we want to be thinking about with pauses is, firstly, they feel longer than for you than they do on the other side. There is a large degree of holding your nerve involved in pauses. Remember that people see your behavior, but you feel your feelings and you think your thoughts, but people can't see your feelings or your thoughts, especially on a video call, because they're below the neck. So it's always worth remembering that you can hold your pause and it might feel awkward, but the likelihood is it won't seem awkward to anybody else. Here's why you should hold them. Firstly, a pause can really help to land a piece of information. So I always say information is a little bit like food for the brain. We take a mouthful of food, we chew it around, we assimilate it, we make it ours. Information is exactly the same, okay? So give people the time to process the information. Take a pause. It also helps you reunite your brain with your delivery. So again, if we're rushing because we're under pressure, sometimes we can go off on those tangents or lose our thread. If that happens, we can pause and just trust that the thing will come back to us. It always will. The thing that is often absent is the lack of trust. It's not that the information is absent. So the pause can really help with that. It's also a really great way for getting people to stay accountable. So if you hold your pause, it can really help people feel like, oh, that's my responsibility, or, oh, I really need to take note of that. So especially if you need people to step up and take responsibility for things, or to recognize the seriousness or the weight of a situation, use your pause. You can also use it for emphasis and all sorts of things like that. You can use it to give people the space to come in. So if you ask a question and then you leave a nice big pause, even though it might feel awkward for you, it gives people that opportunity to come forward and speak up. And sometimes even the shyer or more introvert members of a group will do that in a pause if it's held in a nice, gentle, warm way. And remember that all of this we can express facially. And lastly, a pause is a brilliant, brilliant way to just open your gravitas a little bit, making you seem a little bit more confident, even if you're feeling wobbly inside. Use your pauses. It helps to position you as credible, expert, and it really just helps people to settle into the mood of the webinar. And here's the other thing that I want to say about all of the clarity and all of this stuff about not being cringy on a video call. Be you. Be authentic. I know we hear that phrase bandied around a lot, but what we really want is the you that would like go for a coffee with somebody or go for a gin and tonic or whatever. We want the you who can just sit and chat. So we really want to try and get you in that space as much as possible. So if you can act as if you are simply having a chat with a friend or colleagues in the room, and it's a real casual, like, yeah, you know, coffee, one lump or two kind of situation, then that as well can also help to calm us down and be more authentic on a video call. So this is another thing to bear in mind, and this is definitely something to give some forethought to before you get onto a video conference, which is the concept of motivating. So this piece of work comes from Dan Pink. I'm a huge fan of Dan Pink and love his work a lot. Not on commission, sadly. But please check him out if you don't know of him already. I'm sure quite a number of you already do know, being in the industry that you're in. This comes from a book called Drive, which is all about how we motivate people and how we kind of motivate ourselves. And one of the pieces of research from this book was that, you know, as human beings, we have there's so many different motivators. We're all motivated by different things. But if we were to distill all of those motivators, they come down to three key ones. So the roots, if you like, sit in one of three places: autonomy, mastery, or purpose. AMP is a really good way to remember it, just AMP. So obviously what we want to do is tie whatever it is we're talking about to people's autonomy. So what I might do if I'm talking about this webinar is I might say, you know, this is going to give you the tools to be able to just jump on your laptop anywhere, in your own home, in a cafe, wherever you are, on the move, and be able to take charge of any video call. If autonomy is your motivator, that is going to trigger you in order to go like, oh, I want to do this. If I'm going to talk about mastery, I'm going to say something like, this is going to teach you how to be absolutely kick-ass on a video call. It's going to teach you to be amazing. Then you might be like, yeah, I'm going to be the best at this, or I'm going to be up there with the best. That might be the thing that ignites you. And lastly, but by no means least, there's that sense of purpose, so that greater good. So might be something like, think how you might use these video call tips. You might be able to like take your message out globally to people from the comfort of your front room, even though we're amidst a global crisis. Or it might be something like, what, you know, you can communicate everything you've been working on in 30 minutes purely by mastering the skills of a video call. And if purpose is your driver, then guess what's going to ignite for you? We all have all three of these, it has to be said, but you will know by those examples which ones made you kind of perk up a little bit, and that's your biggest driver. So if you put in a little bit for each of those drivers, then guess what? You've got everybody who's on that video call motivated. So it's really worth giving that a little bit of forethought and positioning it as such, so that you can keep people really, really motivated in terms of the content that you're delivering. And the other thing, of course, is when we're doing these video calls, especially if it's more of an online meeting, is we need to be really specific about the follow-ups. So we need to be clear about who is doing what. Go over it 2 or 3 times, because what we can lose via technology is clarity. And of course, clarity and miscommunication are like the devils of things going wrong in business, and indeed in any arena. So be really clear about who is taking on what. Be really clear about dates, deadlines, the details. Again, things that you feel like might be bleeding obvious in your head. Don't be afraid to speak them out and state the bleeding obvious, because usually people miss stuff. They can't see inside our brains. Sounds kind of obvious, but we can forget that, especially when we're under the pressure of delivering something like an online video call. And lastly, pay attention to how you sign off. So it's perfectly fine to do a see you and be nice and warm about it, but why not go the extra mile? Because last impressions are, I would say, more impactful than first ones, because they're the last thing that we're left with, right? Again, sounds obvious, but really, again, give it some thought and keep it relevant. So if you're signing off around this, and at the moment, obviously we're amidst a pandemic, you might want to say to people like, take care, stay well. I always say to people, stay safe and sane, because I'm always aware of the challenges of not just physical health, but mental health at the best of times, never mind when we're in the middle of a pandemic. But keep it relevant and keep it, again, it's another opportunity to build that rapport. So even post all of this, we will always find ourselves in a context of some description. Make your sign off relevant to that context. And you know what? Remember, with all of this, it's a chat. Don't think about a video call as like, have to be perfect. A video call, just like a presentation, is going to be a series of mistakes really well recovered from. So it's okay to say, oh, I'm quite new to this app, or I'm quite new to Zoom. Can you just feed back to me? It's perfectly fine to be a little bit vulnerable and totally authentic and honest about, can you see me? Is the text box coming up? It's okay to check with people, because actually what you're likely to do is build on your relationships much more, because there's an honesty there. And if you're struggling, other people will be struggling with their technology as well. And you might get a chance to share tips. So I've just had a question from Julia, who's, oh, right, thanks, Julia. Yeah, so she says she feels super awkward. So yeah, it's just a chat. Practice if you feel awkward. Get on with friends or family, or even just dabble around yourself. Most of these programs have got like a coaching area where you can type in the thing that you want to look at, and you'll have a little online webinar of someone kind of giving you some tips. So utilize that, or practice with friends and family. I'm glad it's really helpful for you, Julia, because Julia's saying that she doesn't feel very comfortable on screen. Try not to think of yourself as being on screen. I know that sounds hard, but just try to think of yourself as like, hey, this is a version of a human being, this screen. I think the thing that can put people off a lot is the little green light, or whatever color light you've got on your camera. Imagine that's your microphone rather than a camera. And then again, you can feel a little bit less self-conscious. So I'm aware that this half hour is flying by. So I would just like to open the floor up for questions. And as I've said, that another one has come in, so thank you. So this says, how can I support members of my team who have to navigate client calls now? I would say cascade any of this information to them that's useful. Spend time to practice with them. Sometimes if you're short of time, peg out an area of time where everyone jumps on the call at the same time, and it's just you guys, and then you can practice. It's like a practice, it's a navigation, it's a dabble around with it and try things out sort of thing. Okay, yeah, options for PowerPoint versus, okay. Yeah, so when we've got, when we're sharing our screen, sometimes we might want to jump between screens. And sometimes we might be kind of thinking, well, do I even need a PowerPoint? Do I even need anything to back me up? Is my face and me talking not enough? And I would say every single thing that you do, first of all, is it's completely contextual and it's a complete personal choice. So I choose to use some slides to help with this, because I feel like you get a break from my face. It's not just my face. You get a little bit of visual anchor points. But if you feel like that is a hindrance to you, then don't worry about it. I think when it's one way and it's a webinar, it can be useful to have something, even if it's just one image as a backdrop, because then it just sort of frames the thing. But in terms of it being a meeting or an online meeting, you've got all the thumbnails and you've got each other anyway, so you don't want to be jumping around with too much technology. And the most important thing is the human communication. When it comes to jumping between screens, if you need to share several things, then all you need to do is, most of the systems that we use, I know Zoom definitely has this, and I think some of the others do as well, is when you hit screen share, you just need to hit screen share again, and it will bring up the other options. I was just checking there. Yeah, it will bring up the other options, and you can just click between your screens. And you can also signpost it a little bit as well, so that people are aware of what you're doing. So, oh, I'm just going to change screens now. It might take a couple of seconds just to flick on. Bear with me. People are fine about that. They know how we're working. We know how the technology works. So don't worry about any of that. Okay, what do I do if two people talk at the same time, Emma? Yeah, that is such a good question, and it can happen. Sometimes people fill our pauses as well. Using names and acknowledgement can be a really useful way. So thank you so much for that, Amy. If I can just ask Jane now to, right, if we use that sort of thing, I call it orchestrating. It's like conducting an orchestra. Strings, thank you. Now the brass, only we're using people's names with that. If two people literally start at the same time, I want to say, just name it. Okay, oh, we've got two people talking at the same time. I really want to hear what both of you've got to say. So Chris, could you go first? And then Alex, will come to you. Don't be afraid to do that. People will thank you for that. And of course, it then means that you get to hear people's points of view as well. Got another question here. How do I get a word in edgeways where people have strong personalities? Another great question. We do have to sort of turn ourselves up a little bit, so turn up our confidence a little bit internally. It's a bit of a fake it till you make it strategy. But actually, again, using acknowledgement for people, this also applies to people who love the sound of their own voice as well, is, you know, just thank you so much for that point, Edward. It's really interesting. You know, just some validation can really help that person to, oh, thank you. It interrupts their flow. So acknowledging that. Sometimes you can repeat what they've said, so a little summary. So what you're saying is blah, 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 blah. That's great. Can I add that? And then you sort of take the baton that way. Do it with lots of turned up body language, you know, and all of that stuff, or use the names again. It's a little bit like trying to get your car, you know, drive your car and pull out onto a busy street. Sometimes you've got to just be a little bit brave and give yourself the permission to interrupt a little bit, in the same way that sometimes we might just stick our nose out in order to get into a space. We're obviously not going to drive into a car. Like if someone's full flow, we're not going to cut across them, but we are going to wait until they've got a tiny smidge of a gap, and we're going to go, oh, and we're going to just go in. Even if you do a verbal cue, sorry, like that can help to get you in. It doesn't even have to be a fully formed word, just make a noise and then you can articulate what you need to say. Yeah, I love the thing about being a car as well. It always helps to remind me. So it doesn't look like we've got any more questions, but thank you for that, Adam. What I'm going to share with you now is simply follow-ups. So we are really keen to, thank you, people saying thank you now, thanks very much. We are really keen to hear about what's been useful for you from this webinar. If there's anything else that you would like Big Fish to offer up, we're keen to try and support you guys as much as possible at the moment. So let us know if there's something that would be useful. So if you can email Emma at Big Fish Training, her email's there on the screen. And then obviously, a Big Fish can help you with hopefully some of that stuff, if not all of it. And also, if anyone would like to be in for a chance, we promised you this on the advert. So if anyone would like to be in for a chance to win a copy of my book, a free copy of my Brilliant Assertiveness book, then my email address is there. All you need to do is just ping me a little email just saying, like, can you put me in the draw? And put your address so that if you win, I know where to send it to. Oh, thank you. And some people are saying they'd like to win the book. So thank you. Thank you. Well, I hope you win. And of course, I am aware this is just a 30-minute webinar. So if anything has come up from this that you want to pick my brain about a little more, or you just want to like recap on something, feel free to drop me an email. I'm really happy to go over anything again. I think we're all in this together, aren't we? So we've all got to help each other out a little bit. So wishing you lots of safeness and sanity as you go forward, and hopefully you are now going to be able to get on those video calls with a little bit more confidence and be masters of it. Good luck, and let us know how you get on. Thanks so much. Thank you. Bye. Take good care.